The East Wing of the White House is being demolished so that Donald Trump can construct a ballroom where he will be celebrated like a king.
He's talking about building a ballroom. Let that sink in for working people in this country.
Donald Trump is telling the American people, no Medicaid for you. The ballroom for me.
I just want to put a fine point on this. They have time to talk about some construction at a White House, and there's a long list of presidents who've done the same. They have time for that, but they could not agree by several Democrats not voting for a bill, a lifeline for shutdown workers right now, for those essential workers. They're fake. Full meltdown mode for some Democrats and people on the left. It is all over President Trump's new White House ballroom, and it's an estimated $300 million project paid for by the president himself and private donors. New satellite images show the before and after of the East Wing. That was a major topic at yesterday's White House briefing. A lot going on in the world, and it got very feisty.
Can the president tear down anything he wants without oversight? Could he demolish this building or, say, the Jefferson Memorial?
Is the president looking at any other renovations or significant kind of projects here at the White House?
This is the people's house. Why not inform the public of that change and when it was decided that the East Wing would have to be demolished?
Look, again, with any construction project, changes come, and we have informed all of you.
The East and tearing down two different things.
Well, again, the plans changed when the president heard counsel from the architects and the construction companies who said that in order for this East Wing to be modern and beautiful for many, many years to come, for it to be a truly strong and stable structure, this phase one that we're now in was necessary. And the president wants to do right by the people's house. And so that's exactly what he's doing.
All right, so a long history of renovations at the White House. You can take a look at what some of the past presidents have done. And I mean, you see some of the same places that are being redone right now have been done before. The White House dating back hundreds of years. And here is Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin.
There's a long list of presidents that have done this over the years. The only thing is the difference between when they did it and what's happening now is the president in the White House is actually funding the majority of the renovation, and the rest of it is being paid by personal donors, not taxpayers.
The Trump administration is even trolling Democrats over their ballroom outrage. The White House website launched an official timeline of historical events and included scandals that plagued former Democrat presidencies. They include Bill Clinton's 1998 affair with Monica Lewinsky, the cocaine found during Biden's presidency in 2023. And Focus Now, Lisa Boothe, Fox News political analyst. Now, out of the corner of our eye, we're watching where Letitia James will come out and talk about the charges against her after trying.
There's always so much going on these days.
Not guilty. So you and I are both watching that monitor. If we have to go, we will. Your thoughts?
Well, there's always so much going on, as you just pointed out. Look, I think a lot of things can be true at the same time here. And first of all, what we just heard from his critics and from these Democrats, this isn't for him, these changes, right? This is for the country. This is for future presidents as well. He will not be in the White House forever. So these changes he's making is for the country and for the future. And look, we're sort of used to Trump derangement syndrome at this point. Like, Democrats are just reflexively, everything Trump does, they have to be against it. He's joked he could cure cancer, and they would be against it. There'll probably be lawsuits. They'd probably try to stop the curing of cancer if they could. That being said, it is a little jarring to see demolition done to the East Wing. So I can see how some people might be offended by that or might have some issue with that.
Do you think most people even know the difference between the East and the West Wing?
They probably don't, if we're being honest, Harris. And to President Trump's point, presidents in the past have made changes to the White House. Also, my understanding of the law is the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. The White House is exempt from that. Now, his critics are saying that he's exceeding that authority. There have already been lawsuits. Of course, with everything with President Trump, there's always going to be lawsuits. Anything he's trying to do is going to be challenged, inevitably.
So Jackie Kennedy had to, she and her husband had their money gone through Congress and all that. It was $376 million. Well, okay, and maybe there was some extra money thrown in by private donors. That part of the story we're still researching. I don't know how opaque or transparent that would be anyway for anybody, because it's a donation. I don't know. But $376 million back then of taxpayer money. This right now is put at 250 with the president putting cash in and private donors. Construction always can balloon and cost more. But wow. And she redid the Rose Garden, too, by the way.
Well, and I think the point that President Trump is making with this is valid. He's saying he doesn't want to do these state dinners, these big events with world leaders on the tents on the South Lawn, right? You look at the East Wing. I think it's the largest space for, big events, and it can only has about 200 people. He's trying to do a ballroom that can fit, 999 people. We'll see if there's changes, 90,000 square foot ballroom. And again, these changes aren't for him. These are for future presidents as well. And then you look at these critics who are always hypocritical, like Gavin Newsom, and you look at changes being made to the state capitol in California. It went from $500 million to over $1 billion. It's been shrouded in secrecy. There's been accusations of NDAs, and that's taxpayers on the hook for that. And here, this is done by private money, including the president's, and we're not paying for it as taxpayers.
Well, and we're not standing there for all of this construction either. So, I mean, you and I can't say play by play exactly what will be done. But they've got to have a plan somewhere because the construction companies have to follow it. So for people just to say he's willy-nilly taking down walls, I'm like, well, there's probably a blueprint somewhere. I want to get to this.
Sure.
Democrats and the liberal media ran wild with the misleading caption on a post that includes a clip of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday. The caption reads, Leavitt, quote, "At this moment in time, the ballroom is really the president's main priority." A list of Democrats reposted it with their own snarky takes. California Governor Newsom, who Lisa was just talking about, said, "Good to know." Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said, "Honestly, you can't make this leap up." House Minority Whip Catherine Clark with "Let them eat cake." And the list goes on and on. But apparently they didn't listen to the clip. Here it is.
In addition to the ballroom and the Rose Garden patio, is the president looking at any other renovations or significant kind of projects here at the White House?
Not to my knowledge, no. But he's a builder at heart, clearly. And so his heart and his mind is always churning about how to improve things here on the White House grounds. But at this moment in time, of course, the ballroom is really the president's main priority.
Now, what did you hear?
Well, I think the President Trump is a builder, right? And so he does look at things and, wants to sees it, he looks at, he views it and sees how it could be better, right? That's just the mind of a builder. That's the mind of President Trump. Also, it's just the mind of President Trump as a president. Look at what he's trying to do. This is a man who just came from the Middle East, who was able to get the hostages released, the Israeli hostages there. This is a guy who's trying to solve world peace. He's also working on trying to obtain peace between Russia and Ukraine, as well as trying to keep the government open. This is a man who can do many things at once. And who has already made history just in the second term alone. Mind you, he made history in the first term alone with the Abraham Accords as well. So President Trump can never do anything right in the eyes of his critics on the left or in the media. And this is a guy doing a lot of big things and, also doing big things with the ballroom because that's President Trump. That's his personality. He's a builder. He sees everything grand, everything big. And I think what she says just gives us additional insight into the man, the president, and the commander-in-chief.
Well, look, under Obama, there were times when they did that holiday reception and journalists went for that, and it was a bipartisan affair because, well, really and truly, people shouldn't know how journalists vote. But on the left, they showed up for that. So my question is, if they get invited back under a Republican president, are they going to say we're not coming to the White House now? No, I think they'd line up and go, especially if it's Trump.
I bet we should wait. These same journalists who are criticizing it now and the Democrats, I guarantee 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they're going to be like, the White House ballroom's the best thing we've ever seen. We're going to this event. Here are all my pictures inside of it. It's amazing. It's grand,
Lisa, good to see you.
Good to see you, Harris.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.